Hello everyone, welcome to lecture number 37 of Swayam BHU course on Fundamentals of Economics and Financial Markets. Myself Dr. Anand Singh, and in this particular video I will be discussing with all of you regarding the organization of stock exchanges in India. Now in this particular video I will be discussing with all of you regarding four important key points. That is, key point number 1, what is the definition of a stock exchange, how we can define a stock market. In the second segment we will discuss regarding the different organizations of stock markets. That means what are the different categories of stock market, or what are the different types of stock market which are existing in our country. That means how they can be categorized, what are the different categories we will discuss in the second segment. In the third segment we will discuss regarding what are the different segments of the stock market. That means whatever is the category of any stock market, then in that specific category what are the important segments of the stock market. We will discuss regarding these segments in detail. Now in the fourth segment or last segment of today's video, we will discuss regarding the current scenario. That means whatever the number of stock markets nowadays is, how they may be categorized, or whether there is any specific category or not. Now let us discuss about all these things in detail. Now first, what is the meaning of a stock market, or how we can define a stock market? The stock market is basically a recognized place which provides a platform for the trading of second hand listed securities. That means the stock markets are duly recognized body. That also means only a recognized body. Now recognition is going to be granted by the central government. When the central government grant a recognition to any company, then only that particular company is permitted to operate in the form of a stock market in our country. Now the central government used to grant recognition to all such companies which basically fulfills the provisions which are stated under the Securities Contract Regulations Act 1956. The government of India basically passed SCRA 1956 in the year 1956, so that after fulfilling the provisions which are stated under this particular act, then only the government will grant recognition to such kind of companies. Now after fulfilling the provisions stated under this particular act, the companies were granted recognition. So those companies which were operating in our country but recognition was not granted, such type of stock markets were popularly known as Dabba markets. Now Dabba markets are also a kind of stock markets, but they are not recognized stock exchanges. So we will basically deal, or we will basically discuss regarding only those stock markets which are recognized stock markets. We will not discuss regarding the Dabba markets. Now the stock markets or the recognized stock exchanges, they basically provides a platform for the trading of securities. Now the term trading here basically indicates the buying and selling of securities. That means stock markets provides a platform where the buyers and sellers of the securities, they may interact with each other. In the same manner, it is said that in stock markets second hand or listed securities are traded. Why? Because the fresh securities or the new securities, they were earlier issued in the primary market or the new issue markets. Now when the securities or when the companies will fulfill all the terms and conditions which were prescribed by the primary market, then only they can apply for listing over the stock markets. As such, listing of securities is not compulsory, but after fulfilling the provisions stated under the primary market or the provisions stated by the SEBI which are prescribed for the primary market, if a company fulfills those provisions, then only they will be eligible, or they might be given permission by SEBI, or they might be given permission by the stock markets to get their securities listed over the stock market. But it is clear that for the purpose of trading over the stock market, listing of securities is compulsory. That means as such listing is not compulsory, but if a company is wishing or it is willing that its companies must be traded over the stock market, then it has to go for listing. But if it is not willing to list its securities over the stock market, then listing for such kind of companies is not compulsory. Now, let us discuss regarding some of the important stock markets which were established in our country. Now, all of us knows that the first stock market which was basically established in our country, that was established in 1875, and the name during that particular period was Native Shares and Stock Brokers Association. It was established in 1875. Now, the Native Shares and Stock Brokers Association was the first stock market of our country. It was also the first stock market of entire Asia region, and it was the 10th oldest stock market of the entire world. Now, in the same manner, in 1894, the Ahmedabad Shares and Stock Brokers Association was established. In 1908, Calcutta Stock Exchange Association was established. In 1920, the Madras Stock Exchange was established. In 1934, the Lahore Stock Exchange was established. In 1940, the Uttar Pradesh Stock Exchange and the Nagpur Stock Exchange were established. In 1944, the Hyderabad Stock Exchange Limited was established. As such, it was basically established during 1941, and somewhere it is written as then in 1944 this Hyderabad Stock Exchange was established. In 1947, Delhi Stock and Share Brokers Association was established, and in 1992 the National Stock Exchange was established. In 1990, one small stock exchange or a unique type of stock exchange was established in our country, that was basically dealing with the small companies or the securities of small companies, and the name of that stock market was OTCEI. That means over the counter stock exchange or exchange of India. It was established in the year 1990. So, large number of stock markets were basically established in our country. Now, let us discuss regarding the organizations of stock markets in India. Basically, there were large number of stock markets in our country, but all the stock markets, they were broadly classified under three important categories. We can say that as such the number of stock markets was very large. There were large number of stock markets which were established and which were operating in our country, but all those stock markets, they were basically classified under, or they were basically organized under three important categories, and those categories were: point number one, voluntary association of persons. That means there were large number of stock markets which were established and which were operating in our country, but their nature was voluntary association of persons. For example, Bombay Stock Exchange and Ahmedabad Stock Exchange. Now, these two important stock exchanges, or similarly large number of other stock markets were there, they were, or they basically falls under the category of voluntary association of persons, because large number of persons or large number of brokers, they join together, they make an voluntary association, and that particular organization, that means their voluntary association of persons, was basically operating in the form of a stock market. So, the first important category was voluntary association of person. Now, the second important category was company limited by guarantee. That means initially a company was basically established by some members. Now, those members used to give guarantee for that particular company, for the establishment of that particular company. The guarantors were basically more or less, they were the brokers. So, a company was established by brokers, and the brokers used to give the guarantee for that particular company, and the company, that particular company was operating in the field of stock market. Some of the prominent stock markets which were operating or which were operating in our country, and they basically falls under the category of company limited by guarantee, where the Hyderabad Stock Exchange and the Chennai, or sorry, at that particular time it was called as the Madras Stock Exchange. So, these two stock market were basically formed, or they were established under this particular segment or this particular category, that is company limited by guarantee. Now, the third important segment which came into existence with the establishment of NSE, that is National Stock Exchange, was the public limited companies. That means a public limited company was established by fulfilling the provisions which were stated under the Companies Act 1956, and that public limited company was permitted by the central government under the provisions of SCRA 1956 to operate in the form of a stock market. For example, under this particular category, NSE was established in 1992, but at that point of time, that means in 1992, NSE was simply a public limited company which was established as per the provisions of Companies Act 1956. But later on, permission was granted to that stock market, that means that company, that means NSE, in the year 1993 to operate as a stock market. And from 1994 onwards, the NSE, that means National Stock Exchange, it started functioning as a stock market. Now, let us discuss in detail about the important segments of the stock exchanges. That means whatever their categories, that means whether the company falls under the first category, that is voluntary association of person, or the company falls under the second category, that is company limited by guarantee, or the company falls under the third category, that is public limited companies. Whatever the nature or whatever the category of the stock market is, but all the stock markets were having three important segments. That means whether it is voluntary association of person, then also the stock market was having three important segments, or where the stock market is a public limited company, then also the stock markets were having three important segments, or whether the stock market is of company limited by guarantee, then also the stock market was having three important segments. Now, what were those segments? Those three important segments were: point number one, ownership. That means who were regarded as the owners of that particular stock market. Second category was, or second segment was, the management. That means who were the persons who were basically participating in the management of that particular stock market. And the third important segment was trading rights. That means who used to control or who used to decide about the trading rights. That means who used to decide about the commission charges, who used to decide about the trading hours and all other things. So, the three important segments which were existing in all the important types of stock markets were ownership, management and trading right. Now, let us discuss in detail about all these three segments which were present in all the three types of stock market and what were the major concerns. Now, the holding pattern over different segments was that in all the stock markets, for example, in voluntary association of persons, who were basically the owners or who were basically the management participants and who used to decide about the trading right. Now, in voluntary association of persons, basically in such type of stock market, the association was formed by persons or association was formed by the brokers. That means majority of the participant, majority of the members were the brokers. So, we can see that, or under such type of stock market, basically all the three segment, that means ownership, management and trading right, all the three segments were more or less controlled by the brokers themselves. That means the brokers were having full control over all the three stock markets. That means the brokers used to control over the ownership. Why? Because the owners or most of the owners of that stock market were the brokers. In the same manner, majority of the brokers, they were basically participating in the management of such kind of stock markets. In the same manner, the brokers were dominating over the market and they used to decide about the trading rights also. So, in the voluntary association of person, all the three segments were completely dominated by the brokers themselves. Now, let us discuss about the three segments in the second category, that is the company limited by guarantee. Now, under such type of stock markets, we have already seen that the guarantee was basically given by the brokers themselves. So, majority of the persons or the participants in those stock markets were brokers. Now, let us discuss regarding who used to participate in three different segments. Now, in the company limited by guarantee, the brokers were basically regarded as owners. So, they were participating in the ownership segment. In the same manner, the brokers used to dominate over the management category also, and the brokers were also deciding about the trading rights. So, we can see that in the second category also, that means in the second type of stock markets also, or in the second type of stock markets, that is the company limited by guarantee, all the three segments, that is ownership, management and trading right, it was also directly or indirectly, more or less, it was controlled by the brokers themselves. But now let us discuss regarding the third type of stock market, which was established with the establishment of NSE, that is National Stock Exchange. All of us knows that NSE was established in the year 1992 in the form of a public limited company. Now let us discuss about the three important segments of NSE. Now it was seen that basically all these three segments, that means ownership, management and trading rights, were basically segregated from each other in such type of stock markets. That means in the stock markets which were basically regarded as the public limited company, all the three segments, that means ownership segment, management segment and trading rights segment, was participated by different kind of members or different kinds of brokers. Now let me discuss in detail about this particular segment. Suppose a person was participating in the ownership segment in a public limited company. That means such type of stock markets which were earlier or which were established in the form of a public limited company. Now, if a person was allowed to participate or to become the owner of that particular company or that particular stock market, then that particular member or that particular broker or that particular person was not allowed to participate in rest of the two segment. That means he was not allowed to participate in the trading rights segment and he was not allowed to participate in the management segment. Now, suppose one member or broker was permitted to participate in management, then in that particular condition, the person who was participating in the management segment, he was not permitted to participate in the ownership segment as well as in the trading rights segment. In the same manner, in the public limited companies or in the stock market which were established in the form of a public limited company, suppose a person or a broker or a member of that particular stock market was basically participating in the trading rights segment, then he was not permitted to participate in the ownership segment as well as he was not permitted to participate in the management segment. That means it was very clear that one person was permitted to participate in one segment only. That means if you are participating in one segment, then you are not permitted to participate in rest of the two segment. So basically there were three types of stock market, that is voluntary association of persons, that is company limited by guarantee and public limited companies, and the control, the ownership control, the management control and trading rights were basically imparted by the brokers or members in the following manner. Now, what was the major drawback in these three type of, or what was majorly lacking, especially in the voluntary association of persons category or especially in the company limited by guarantee category or types of stock market? What was the major drawback? Let us discuss regarding that particular point. Now, it was seen that there is a clear-cut conflict of interest as brokers were dominating over all the three segments, especially in the voluntary association of persons and company limited by guarantee types of stock market. Under those two types of stock market, since the brokers were clearly dominating over all the three segments, that's why there was a clear-cut conflict of interest. Why? Because now suppose one broker who is going to decide about the trading rights, the same broker is the owner of that stock market. Now he is going to take decisions which are going to favor him. Why? Because he is the owner also. In the same manner, suppose a owner is there, then how he can be permitted to participate in the management category? Because there is a clear-cut conflict of interest. The same person, if he will be permitted, or the same broker, if he will be permitted to participate in all the three segments, then he is going to take decisions which are basically suitable for him, or such type of decisions will be taken by that broker which are going to provide maximum benefit to himself, to that particular person only. So, there was a clear cut conflict of interest, especially in the category of voluntary association of person and in the category of company limited by guarantee. Also, in those two important types of stock market, it was also seen that investors' interest was completely ignored, as brokers used to manipulate the markets for their own advantage. Basically, the brokers used to take such kind of decisions which were beneficial for them, and that is why they used to make necessary manipulations, they used to make necessary changes, they used to frame such kind of rules and regulations which were beneficial for themselves. But what was the major drawback? That the brokers were not considering the interest of the investors. Now, since large number of investors were also participating in the markets, so it is considered to be a drawback, because when the brokers, they are going to take decisions as per their likings, or such type of decisions which are going to provide benefits to them, and they are not going to consider about the investors' interest. So, it was one of the major drawback, especially for those two types of stock markets. Now, because of such kind of things, or because of such kind of mechanism, our Indian financial markets, it basically witnessed two very prominent scandals which were directly concerned with the stock markets, especially one which was happened in 1991-1992, that is Harshad Mehta scandal, and the second scandal was which happened in 2001, that is Ketan Parikh scandal. Now, especially the scandal of 1991-1992, that means Harshad Mehta scandal, during that particular point of time, the stock markets, they crashed by over 54%. That means our stock market crashed by 54%. So, it basically hurted the sentiments of large number of investors. Now, because of the prevailing condition, because of the regulatory mechanism, and because of the brokers' dominance over the stock markets, and since large number of scams, they were basically happening in our stock markets, especially these two scams, so the government decided to make necessary changes in the stock markets. So, later on, the central government in the year 2001, it decided to make necessary changes in the stock markets. So, the Honorable Finance Minister of 2001, that is Mr. Yashwant Sinha, he basically declared in the parliament that the government is going to make necessary changes in the current situation, or in the prevailing situation of the stock market. Basically, the finance minister of our country during 2001, or in the period of 2001, he gives a statement in the parliament that the government is planning to introduce the concept of corporatization and demutualization. Now, for that particular purpose, for that specific purpose, the government of India basically constituted an committee in the year 2002. Specifically on 28th August 2002, the government of India constituted an committee under the chairmanship of CJI, ex-CJI, that is Chief Justice of India, that is M.H. Kania. So, a committee was constituted by the government of India in August 2002 under the chairmanship of Justice M.H. Kania ji. Now, that particular committee, which was basically led by the CJI, ex-CJI, M.H. Kania ji, it presented its report in the year 2004, and the government of India accepted the recommendations which were presented by M.H. Kania committee and which were concerned with the stock markets. Now, the scheme which was basically adopted by the government of India. That means the scheme of corporatization and demutualization, which was also given by or which was recommended by M.H. Kania committee, that was accepted by the government and introduced by SEBI on 12th October 2004 by making necessary amendments, by making necessary changes under the provisions of section 4A and section 4B of Securities Contract Regulations Act 1956. So, in order to introduce the concept of corporatization and demutualization, which was recommended by Justice M.H. Kania or the M.H. Kania committee, the government make necessary recommendations, the government make necessary changes in the provisions of section 4A, section 4B of Securities Contract Regulations Act, and thereafter the scheme of corporatization and scheme of demutualization was introduced in our financial markets. Now, let us discuss in brief regarding the concept of corporatization and the concept of demutualization. Now, corporatization, under corporatization segment, all the stock exchanges were asked to transform themselves into corporates, or they were asked by the government, they were asked by the SEBI to transform themselves into companies from their earlier existence, that means from association of persons or from the mode of companies limited by guarantee. Now, all the stock markets which were basically established in the form of association of persons or who were established in the form of companies limited by guarantee, they were asked to transform themselves into companies. Now, under the demutualization segment, the central government was of the opinion that, and SEBI was of the opinion that all the three segments, that means ownership, trading rights and management of all the stock markets must be segregated from each other. That means permission will be granted to a person to participate in one segment only, so that there will be no case of conflict of interest. So, this particular concept was demutualization. That means segregation of all the three segments, that means ownership, management and trading rights from each other. So, by introducing the concept of corporatization, the government asked all the stock market to transform themselves into corporates or companies, and by introducing the scheme of demutualization, the government asked all the stock markets to segregate all the three segments, that means the segments of ownership, management and trading right. That means one person will be allowed to participate in one segment only. Now, after the introduction of corporatization and demutualization scheme in the year 2004, Bombay Stock Exchange was the first stock exchange of our country which was corporatized and demutualized in the year 2005. Now, in the next video, I will be discussing with all of you regarding the major functions of stock exchanges. Now, in that particular video, I will be discussing with all of you regarding the meaning and definition of stock exchange, the definition of capital formation or what is the important function, how capital formation is basically happened or how capital formation is done by the stock markets, what is the meaning of screen based trading, what is the liquidity of investment, what is the meaning of liquidity and how stock markets they provide liquidity to the investments, how transactions are permitted in smaller lots nowadays and how safety is there. What about the mechanisms, what about the rules and regulations which are framed by SEBI in order to provide safety to the dealings. That means whenever the securities are traded over the stock market, how far they are safe. So, all such type of functions will be discussed by me in the next video. So, once again very thanks for watching this particular video.